I had the distinct pleasure of introducing our speaker. I understand a little bit now how the professors feel when they get to introduce their students. Michelle was not a student of mine, but she was an intern here at the Arboretum, so I do feel a little possessive of her. So, but the love of flowering plants and concern for the environment brought Michelle into the landscape business as a designer. She'd already been a home gardener for many years. As a landscape designer, she's worked with homeowners, schools, churches, and the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. Michelle, in 2013, completed a master's horticultural science and design with a landscape architecture minor from state here, and that's a rigorous combination there. Her research was titled Valuing the Residential Landscape, Comparison of Select Ecosystem Service Benefits Between Conventional and Sustainable Design. Michelle has a whole slew of certifications for sustainable landscapes, including Certified Plant Professional from the North Carolina Nursery and Landscape Association, Energy Saving Landscape Certification from NCMLA, which she actually has taught some of the courses with me in last year. So she has the certification now. She's teaching it. She's a certified residential rain garden designer from NC State's University Biological and Agricultural Engineering Department, and a certified associate with American Rainwater Catchment Systems Association. A lot of everything. So please welcome me for Michelle Rose and.
You all hear me? I will just start with thank you for being here tonight. I know it's cold, I know it's December, and you're very busy, so I appreciate that you are here. I am also grateful to the Arboretum and staff for having me. It is my honor and privilege to be here. And I think we can go ahead with the lights. How is the sound now? Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, that's much better. Okay. It's my pleasure to be able to give back to my alma mater and to the J.C. Ralston, because I had a great internship when I was here. So without further ado, one other little quick thing. I am recovering from a cold, so if I go for a drink of water or a cough drop, just bear with me. It's to help get through tonight's talk without sounding like a croaking frog. So, superpowers, nature superpowers. Well, what exactly am I talking about? Well, basically, it's anything that nature does for us, or that nature does just automatically without too much interference from us, and we benefit from. That's what I'm talking about. Now, in academic terms, these are called ecosystem service benefits. I prefer superpowers. And nature does these things and does not send us a bill, which is really, really nice. The downside of that is we tend to take it for granted that we are always going to have clean air, clean water, those sorts of things. So tonight, this is a little roadmap for what we're going to do. We are going to start in cultural services, and I think you'll find that you're already very familiar with those. I'm actually going to skip over provisioning services. All of these can be topics unto themselves, but it's somewhat self-explanatory, and there's also a lot of other people who can talk to those things. Then we're going to go to supporting services, and then finish up with regulating services. So, how many of you garden because you love it? Say yes. Yes. That was most of you. How many of you get something spiritual or soul-filling or emotional from gardening? Say yes.
Yes.
Okay. That's that is a cultural benefit. That's part of that spiritual, and as well as aesthetic. I mean, the aesthetic is obvious, but the stress reduction, the connection with nature, that fulfillment, that is a cultural benefit. And we happen to be in a place that is a perfect example of cultural benefits. And we're not the only ones who think so, since they've been named one of the best, number 8 of the best university gardens in the world. I mean, that's pretty high ranking. It's the educational programs. It's the beauty of the plants and the design. It is the recreational opportunities. I mean, people come here to picnic. People come here to have family photo shoots. People have their weddings here. You know, lots of wonderful things take place. So this Arboretum, the J.C. Ralston Arboretum, is offering many cultural benefits to us and to the greater community. So do you feel like you understand what's cultural benefits, the general idea of cultural benefits? I'm seeing some heads nod. Good. Well, then we're going to figure that was a familiar place. We'd start there. And now we're going to move on to some supporting services. We're gardeners. The first place we should start is in the soil. If you have tested your soil in the last 2 years, say yes.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, you guys are good. Or are you just saying yes because I told you to say yes? You guys are really good. If you haven't tested in the last couple of years, you're on the gardening naughty list. We test the soil for the same reason that the doctor does blood work when you go for your physical, to find out what's really going on. We give it what it needs to have the proper pH and the proper nutrient levels for the plants that we're growing. So it is very important. And it is soil, it's not dirt. And that's an important distinction. And soil is alive. And it is that the microbes, the plants, the animals that are in that soil, that's where the magic is happening. And it's making that community healthy and alive. That is going to give you healthy plants, and then your garden is gorgeous, and you'll be very happy. And my clients are happy when their plants are happy. Those of you who live in Raleigh, you are lucky. You have the city of Raleigh, they have that yard waste center, and you can get great deals on mulch and leaf compost. You know, fall, nature gives us all those leaves and the pine straw that we can use for compost and mulch. And a lot of people just, it's waste. They just send it to the curb. But nature's giving us what we need. And when I interned here, I was in an older part of the garden, and we were digging, and it was, this shovel went all the way in on the first try. I was like, oh my goodness, what's going on here? And Tim said, for about the past 10, 12 years, they've been using City of Raleigh leaves, and leaf mold. Oh, what a difference it made. And you can build up to an inch of topsoil a year with leaves. So that's a simple thing that we can do. Now, if you want to learn a whole lot more, and Chris mentioned it earlier, sign up for Bryce's class. It's amazing how complicated soil is, but the magic is in the organic material. And I'm sure that Bryce will get into that. And moving on to plants, gardener's favorite topic, right? We love plants, that's why we do this. This is an abbreviated list of all the things that trees and large evergreen shrubs do for us when you look at it in total environmental benefits. Not just the pretty, not just the flowers, not just the leaves, not just the fruit or the seeds, but other things. Not just for us, but for other people, for other animal creatures as well. There's also some monetary value associated with this. In my research, I used my own third of an acre lot as a case study. And these were the estimates for what the values, the monetary value attached per year attached to the trees on my property. Now the air filtration, that's a benefit for me, my family, my neighbors, because it means the air is a little bit cleaner and it may reduce our healthcare costs. The rainfall interception, well, that's a benefit to the town of Cary because the trees that are absorbing that water, they don't have to deal with that stormwater runoff. So they're the ones benefiting. The energy savings, well, that's money we didn't spend to the power company because of how we have landscaped. And then the structural value, that is actually replacement insurance costs. If we were, let's say a tornado came through and took out all our trees and we were to replace all of the trees with the same kind and size and age, that's what it would cost. And of all these values, obviously the replacement cost is the one we have the greatest handle on because we have more experience with that. All of these others are estimates, and over time these estimates are going to change as science and economists work more in this area. But your plants are valuable. Plants are part of biodiversity. Now, which of these yards do you think is more hospitable to wildlife? Birds or squirrels?
On the left.
On the left? Yeah. The greater the plant diversity, then the greater the animal diversity. And that includes insects. It also includes some things we don't like deer and rabbits. They're going to show up, but it's a backhanded compliment because it's saying you have a great little ecosystem going, and I want to participate. Yeah. Yes. Voles are my number one nemesis. When thinking of biodiversity, it's really important that you look at the plant families. Now I know this year coming up for the Ralston Arboretum, the theme is about stop and smell the roses. And the rose family is a very famous family, very large plant family. Sometimes it's a rather disease-prone plant family. You need to look at your plant families, not just the individual genus or species. You need to look at the families and make sure you have variety there. That's very important. Now, some people want to garden for specific wildlife, what I call the 3 Bs, the birds, the butterflies, and the bees. And there are certifications you can get for your home landscape from any of these organizations, and yes, you can have multiple. There are properties that have more than one. So if this is your love, then this is an avenue you may want to pursue. Now I'm going to move on into regulating services, and we're going to spend more time there because that may be the area that is most unfamiliar to people and the area where you can really make a difference in your landscape if you haven't already. And that's my goal, that you're going to get 1 or 2 ideas you can take home and implement at your house. First thing you might need to understand is what's in technical terms is called the water energy nexus. Basically what it is it takes water to make energy. And whether we're talking hydroelectric power, the cooling towers at Sharon Harris, hydraulic fracturing, whatever, it takes water to make energy. The reverse is also true in that it takes energy to treat water to potable standards. It takes energy to pump it to everybody's house and business. and then it takes energy to treat it again before it gets sent down the river. So when you save either water or energy, you're actually saving both. Unfortunately, it's not going to show up as credit on your bill. I wish it did. But you are saving both. Water is the essence of life. Our bodies are mostly water. When we go explore into space, the first thing they look for is, oh, was there water here? Could there be water here? Because life as we know it is water dependent. We have all the water we're ever going to get. It just cycles through rain and evaporation and transpiration and all these various processes. But we have all the water we are going to get. And only 1% of that, or less than 1% of that, is potable water. So how many of you think we should protect that 1% of potable water? Say yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I agree. So, here's some ways we can do it. According to the US EPA, up to 50% of our irrigation is wasted. So the first thing we can do is just be a lot smarter about how and when we water. And that picture over there on the far right, that always burns me up anywhere I am and I see sprinklers or irrigation systems going in the rain. The summer I was interning here, the apartment complex across from the movie theater there on Blue Ridge was, I guess, fairly new. I worked mornings. I was smart. I worked in the mornings before it got too hot, and then I went home. And I would be going home at lunchtime, and they would have their sprinklers going at noon or 12:30. Worst time to water. And it gives the whole industry, a bad name. So the important thing is to water when the soil needs it. I have been on consults at people's homes where they're complaining about their plants dying, and what it turns out, especially last spring, we had a wet spring in 13, they were still running their irrigation systems. They didn't have rain sensors, or they didn't shut it off, or they didn't have smart controllers, so the plants were drowning. And we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. And these are some things you can buy, order online, that will help you make better use of the water. And if you don't know, if you're not good at figuring out if the soil is dry or wet, the soil moisture probe may be the best investment you make. And you can use it in containers, and you can use it in the ground. Soaker hoses and drip irrigation, the smaller water droplets are the most efficient way to irrigate. They found this out in agriculture, and now that knowledge is transferring over to landscape. That's why the newer irrigation systems, have the micro heads, they have the smaller droplets, they also have the controllers that look at the weather. No need to irrigate if we just had rain or the soil's wet. So, wise water usage for irrigation. That's something you can definitely do if you're not doing it already. The other issue with water is when it does rain. Think of this last August. What did we have? Over 7 inches, over 8 inches? And it wasn't even a hurricane or a tropical storm. We had all this rain, and a lot of it's running off our properties. This little graphic here is typical of what's happening. It's running off the roof, running off the driveway, running off the yard, goes into the curb and gutter, then it goes into the streams, and eventually it ends up in the Neuse River because Raleigh is in the Neuse River basin. The larger slide It's just a schematic of some things that can be done to help hold some of that rainwater on your property. And when you do that, several things happen. One, you're not going to have to water as much because your plants are going to have more water available to them. Secondly, your municipality is going to have lower costs to deal with stormwater because there's less of it. Now granted, one individual lot doesn't make a big difference, but you multiply that over multiple lots or neighborhoods or the whole city, and it does make a difference. And every little bit helps. This is the Duke Smart Home. Have any of you been there before? It's quite an interesting place, and you want to talk about a water energy nexus in terms of all the things that they do there. But I'm showing this as a local example of multiple things with stormwater. First off, there's a green roof. You can't really see it, and at this particular point in time, it was mostly dead. They had to redo it, but they did have a green roof. They do have the tank for water harvesting. They're also using the vines to shade the porch and the windows. And these solar panels are also helping to shade the lower area. And back behind this wall, that's a rain garden to help deal with some of the excess. So they had on that property, it's worth seeing for things you can do both inside and outside your home to save both water and energy. And I know that there's we have a green roof upstairs, we have geothermal for this building. There's a lot of things here at the Arboretum as well. Now my house, what I have is a permeable brick patio in the back with some permeable flagstone paths. I have this one little rain barrel, and in the front I put in 3 rain gardens because our front yard has a 20% slope down to the street, so water rushes off of it. The analysis that I did with the implementation of these things is that stormwater runoff was reduced to 22%. So that's 22% less water going off the property and staying on the property in the soil for my plants, which means less watering for me, less time and energy, and less expense. So that's a good thing. Now the nitrogen and the phosphorus loading, those usually come from fertilizers, often. And keeping that out of the stormwater is very important because those are some of the pollutants that, stormwater is not treated here. It just goes straight to the creek, to the stream, to a reservoir, to the Neuse River. There's no filtration other than what nature has in terms of soil and plants. If you remember Pfiesteria and algae blooms and fish kills, the chain reaction starts with too much nitrogen in the water. So that is very, very important to manage. And that's why the soil test, going back to soils, doing the soil test, and thank you all for doing that, you're such good gardeners, give your soil what it needs, but don't give it too much. Because it's just going to run off the property, and you've wasted time, money, energy, and potentially polluted water. So that's not a good thing. So just those little things are helping. Again, this is a 1/3 of an acre lot, and you have to think, all right, what happens if we expand that to the neighborhood, to the whole city? Then you get really impressive results. Mentioned rain gardens. This is the lowest, the bottom rain garden. That's the takes the runoff from the upper tube the day we dug it. No plants, no nothing. This is in its true ugly duckling state. Up here, this is what happens after you let the plants grow. It looks a lot better. It looks like a garden, not just a pile of dirt. I don't know how many of you do the Garden Conservancy tour? Did you get up to Wake Forest? Do you recognize this house? This was the one in downtown Wake Forest, right by the Divinity School. They did a slightly different design with their rain garden. That's a rain garden, by the way. One of 2 or 3 they have on the property. When they were grading, before they rehabbed the house, they went down 5 feet to amend the soil. And then they kind of bermed up around it so that all the rainwater goes to these locations. And she said, yeah, we'll have standing water for a little while, but then it all percolates in. So that's how they are managing their stormwater. And it's beautiful, beautiful. And the key with rain gardens, and this is what, when you do one in somebody's yard and you're digging way down and they start freaking out, and that does happen sometimes when you start tearing up people's lawns, is you have to go to a certain depth to make that good soil. Because you mix in compost, you mix in PERMEABLE, there's multiple recipes for what needs to be in there, but you've got to have that filter bed because that's what's absorbing and holding the water. So that's one thing that you can do. And they are gardens. They should be pretty. I would say plan to have 60 to 70% of your plants be evergreens. Some early rain gardens were there were a lot of perennials, or they were a lot of deciduous plants, and so part of the year they look really bad, and that's not what you want. It is a garden. You want it to look good, and it can look good. It can be beautiful, and it should be beautiful. But evergreens are the key to keep that. Have somebody who's always thirsty and somebody who needs some nutrition, keep absorbing them. I mentioned the permeable paving. This is my patio with its permeable paving. Yes, it will pond. It gone within 30 minutes after any rainstorm. I've never had standing water for more than 30 minutes. If you walk on NC State, the infamous brickyard, all of the brick at NC State is permeable to help reduce the stormwater runoff. And there are many, many kinds of pavers. You can have whole patios and walks that are permeable pavers. Lots of products are out there that you can use. Water catchment. California and Texas are really leading the country with this because they've had to with their drought situation. There are so many products coming on the market. Things you hide in your crawl space or under your deck. Decorative things that are meant to be seen. Some people paint them or put trellises around them and hide them with plants. I mean, there's numerous things you can do to do this. Now, the Mercedes-Benz of water catchment is Aquascapes. And they have these huge container blocks that they build into your ground. And then you have these beautiful water features or water ponds or streams up above. But those hold a lot of water and they can hold the rainwater and recycle it. You need a check with a number of zeros to afford that. That is not, like I said, that's the Mercedes-Benz of rainwater management, but it's gorgeous. It is truly gorgeous. If you are going to harvest rainwater and you're planning to use it for irrigation, there's a couple things you need to think about. First is, where are you going to direct that first flush? That's that first ½ inch to an inch. Typically, you don't want to save that. That's the dirtiest of the waters, and that's what needs to be going to the rain garden or some other feature so that it filters before it goes off your property. You also need to think about, what is this going to be used for? I tested the water from my rain barrel as part of my master's research and found out there's all kinds of oaky stuff in there. And I have a very typical rain barrel. It just has a debris screen on the top and the hose that connects from the downspout into the rain barrel. And of course, everything that comes off the old, well, then it was an old roof. Critters get in there and leave organic deposits. Basically, it wasn't safe to use for edibles. Now, if you're going to capture rainwater to use with edibles, 2 things I recommend. One would be a first flush diverter so that some of the water, that first flush of water, is not going into your rain storage because that's the most polluted. And then use some sort of drip or soaker hose so that you get another level of filtration through the soil. But if you're hand watering from a rain barrel, especially leafy greens, herbs, anything like that, it has the potential to be a health hazard. You also have to consider local regulations and plumbing and roofing codes, especially, people all over the world harvest rainwater and treat it to drinking water standards. It can be done, but you're not going to find that equipment at your typical hardware store or big box store. I mean, that takes people who are certified specialists in that area. But we're going to be seeing more and more of it, and you're seeing more and more of it in commercial property because they have to. They have to manage it. Mentioned energy savings costs, and Mark mentioned the energy saving landscapes that the certification helped teach it a little bit. I'm going to share, that's an all-day course. I am going to share, though, a few things that you can do in your own home landscape to help save on your energy bills. After last year's polar vortex and how cold it feels tonight, doesn't that sound like a good idea to be able to save on your energy bills? So trees and large shrubs provide energy savings through the shading, the evapotranspiration, which helps cool the air, and in windbreaks. I'm just going to focus on the shading tonight. First thing you can do is shade your AC unit. You can reduce its operating costs up to 10% if you shade your air conditioner unit. Now, if it's in the crawl space or the attic, not an option. But if it's outside, shading it is a good idea. Shade, especially on the south side, shade your windows, doors, and your hardscape. Now, most of your, whether it's the heat in the winter or the cooling in the summer, the loss is through your windows and doors. So if you can shade them, especially in the summer, you will help reduce your costs. Also, reduce shading your hardscape, especially if it's right attached to your house, because it absorbs heat, and then at night it's giving it back off, reflective heat. So those 2 things can help you save money. And right out back here of the building, they have the nice pergola with the vines. That's exactly what that does. It provides that needed shade in the summer, which makes it nicer to be out there when it's warmer, and it also helps shade these windows during the daytime. Another thing you can do is minimize hardscape, because concrete, rock, brick, whatever, it absorbs heat. That's just what it does. It's thermal mass. So if you can minimize your hardscape, of any sort, whether it's your paths, your driveway, your patios. Either minimize it and or shade it, or both, even better, then you're going to reduce your energy bills. And it can be beautiful. I'd like to walk on those paths. Anybody else like to walk on those paths? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Something else you can do is use either solar or LED lighting in your landscape. And what was the inspiration for solar panels? Plants. Plants photosynthesizing. That's the inspiration for solar. Try and mimic what plants naturally do. So, those things can reduce your costs. Here's a brief recap of some of the benefits of sustainable landscapes in terms of cleaner water and air, cooler cities, carbon sequestering, resource conservation, habitat, lower costs. You know, if the cost to your municipality to manage stormwater or to pump potable water to you goes, you know, if those aren't rising or if those are going down, then, you know, they don't have costs to pass on to you in your monthly bill. So it's a win-win. Lots and lots of programs out there. Sustainable Sites is one of them. They have landscapes are for living, that's for residential properties. US EPA has their GreenScapes and the WaterSense landscapes. Again, lots of people, lots of players. Everybody's getting involved with this one way or another because it is so important and it affects all of us. And so with that, I say thank you very, very much. I appreciate your time and attention, and I want to open up the floor to questions. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that you didn't like to use water from your rain barrel on your plants. Now, is that because you had an asphalt roof, or is it for other reasons?
The question was, I said I didn't like to use the water from my rain barrel. I use it on ornamentals. I use it on my ornamental containers because it's just a 55-gallon barrel. Yes, there were things that came off of the roof. And at that,
do you have an asphalt roof?
I do have an asphalt roof. We put on a new roof this year. I haven't retested, so I don't know what's in it. But there were things that had come from the roof. There was also E. coli, which E. coli is just an indicator species that there's some fecal matter, but it doesn't tell you whose fecal matter it is.
Bird droppings?
It could be bird, it could be lizard, it could be frog, it could be snake. And like snakes and lizards and frogs, they are carriers of diseases like salmonella. I don't know if you knew that or not, but so if your rain barrel, is not tight to that they can't get in, that's a possibility. And I get them in, I have anoles, they love to be in the shade. I have the little tree frogs, during the day, they want to be in the shade, they'll go in the rain barrel, they'll go in the watering can, so I've just kind of come to the conclusion. I won't use it on edibles, we use potable water on edibles. And that's why I said, especially if you have a larger system, having that first flush diverter, using soaker hoses or some sort of drip irrigation, that's going to reduce your exposure tremendously. Yes, sir.
I found a solution for that problem.
What's that?
As far as watering vegetables and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
I have nine water barrels around my house.
Cool.
And that's what I'm putting the trash cans that I get filled up from them besides so I got about over 1,000 gallons at all times. But I found that by building a greenhouse with a plastic roof on it, of the greenhouse plastic, I have all the water, a 27-foot long greenhouse, I have all that water come off into a trash can. It is clean as can be, and that is wonderful in my garden inside the greenhouse.
Awesome. Did everybody hear that, what he said?
See, what people don't realize is that even if you have a 10-foot roof, you have no idea how much water will come off that in
Lots.
one rain. I mean, I'm telling you, you can fill up 10 trash cans in no time. And I just have one trash can, that fills it up in between rains, because I water my garden once a week, an inch, and that's it. I don't overwater, underwater on that, none of that stuff. And the rain barrels, like she said, they're great for the rest of the garden, the ornamentals and all that stuff out there. And they're, but even with that, I don't even use those anymore. I have the water, and I use it, periodically, but I personally put down what she was saying earlier about the mulches and stuff. I got wood chips free from local tree services that they'll drop it for you at your house at no charge. Otherwise, it'll cost them $55 per drop. And number one, the wood chips I put down a foot deep. Anytime it rains, it retains the water. It's moist underneath, but it's dry on top. You walk on it, nothing gets stuck to your feet. I have no weeds, no grass. I never water anything because it holds the moisture. Never water anything. Unless I get a 3 weeks straight with no rain, I'll give it a little, buckets full of water. But other than that, I don't water nothing. People say, well, what are you doing? How much time do you spend in this yard of yours? I say none, because I don't pull any weeds. There's no weeds. I don't have to water it because everything is moist. Just a thought for everybody,
Yeah, and thank you for sharing. I want to come to your house.
I have pictures up for you.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. So he has pictures, show and tell afterwards.
I mean, not only that, but everything is, when you have wood chips, like he was saying about when you get mulches down and they decompose and all that, let me tell you something. Wood chips, when they start decomposing, you can have unbelievable amount of soil that's going to be like so rich that you can have wood. You dig mine up, there's nothing but worms under there.
And
when
that's
the
a
worms
sign
show
you have
up,
good soil.
yeah, and not only that, but the fungi and the mycorrhiza and all that, the white mesh that's in there, what is it called? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. the filament.
Yeah, I mean, it's all over it, because it holds the moisture and it spreads it out to all the plants.
All right.
So when you were doing your research on your own property, were there things that you thought you might find and sort of surprised you that you didn't find, or things that you didn't think you might find that sort of popped up and showed up?
I don't know, doing the research. I try not to think about when I was doing the research. I think what surprised me the most was doing the calculations and figuring out just how much water was running off my roof, off my property, and in my research I had a schematic for two 2,000-gallon tanks on either side of the house and stuff, which we didn't do because of cost, but just the amount of water that runs off a property, it's unbelievable. That was probably one of the most surprising things. The other that surprised me, because I have a lot of plants, I'm one of those gardeners who has a plant addiction, and it's just how much variety I really did have. And I've also reapportioned some of what I had. I have, on purpose now, far less in the rose family because of the disease pressure. And I try not to add, as much as I love azaleas and blueberries, I'm trying to keep a level amount with those because they're all in the Ericaceae family. So I'm trying to be more aware of families that I don't have that much plant material in, and those that I do, and try to, bump up the ones that I don't have too much. Yes, ma'am.
You talked about the permeable pavers.
Mm-hmm.
Is the paver itself permeable, or is it the cracks in between and what you've done underneath? What makes it
Depends on who-
permeable pavers?
Depends on what product you're using. Mine, those are solid bricks, and it's the fact that there's no mortar, and it's what's in between. And that's what most of NC State is. Now, I know up here in the last house, they used the stone and that clingstone product, which is the first adhesive that I have found that is permeable and allows the water to go through it. So that's really nice. That's really nice. Some vendors, and there's a number of vendors out there that have permeable paving systems, and depending on the application, like if it's a parking lot or if it's a home landscape, it may be the material itself is permeable, or it's just that there's more gaps in it. So it kind of varies by the actual material. So you're looking confused, like I didn't answer your question.
I'm trying to figure out how I would go about doing something without hiring a professional to do it for me, because I can't afford that kind of thing.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out, is it in laying a gravel and sand base? What makes it permeable?
Yes, the base is important because you need something to, and even if you're going to mortar, you've got to lay a base.
And no mortar.
But yes, it is in using sand and gravel underneath and getting, you want, if it's a patio, you're going to have to excavate, you're going to have to get it level, and you're going to have to get that base in there. And depending on what material you use, whether it's pavers, or it's bricks, or it's decorative stone, leaving some space there so the water can go through. Is that answering your question?
Okay, understand. You also, the material, you sweep something in between your pavers.
Sand or something.
Some pavers are made with a gap. You use, a lot, if you go to a place that does this professionally, they give you the product, they may tell you to use polymeric sand, which people like because it doesn't wash out. Weeds don't grow in it, but it's also not permeable. And then you've made a solid surface. So use coarse builder sand to sweep in between your cracks, and that allows water to move through.
Back here now.
Yeah, with more and more development in areas around the neighborhood, I've found that there's a few places in my yard where I've gotten just tons of runoff from the neighboring yards. What's the best way to start to do with those areas? Do a rain garden? Or?
A rain garden is an option. Whenever you're looking at managing the stormwater, especially you start at the highest physical point of your property, and that may be where you're bordering, your neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
And a rain garden is an option. If you're going for trying to get as much to infiltrate and treat that runoff, rain garden, bioswales, they go by many, many, many different names, but it's the same principle. Doing that will help. You could possibly build a loose stacked retaining wall and fill behind that and plant, and that will hold some water as well. A lot of the old school thought would be to put in a drain and pipe it, down to the street. And that option still exists. So those, it's always property specific, and different neighborhoods have different covenants. And
Well, one place is the strip between the neighbor's yard and my driveway. So the driveway is going to get flooded because it's not permeable.
right, and driveways are notorious. Yeah.
So that little strip has to do all the work.
Is it on the it's on the property line though, isn't it?
It's close to the property.
Yeah, the guidelines are not to do them
Fix
near
the
your
neighbor's yard?
on the property line, and often there's utilities there, so that could be a consideration as well. So another option is like a dry creek, which is not going to infiltrate that much, but it will kind of contain it and get it down. Again, everything is site specific, and also subject to your soils, your site, whatever your homeowners association says and your municipality says and all that. So, but those are some ideas. There was Pink, you had a question.
Yeah, I didn't know what your strategy was for weed control when you have a permeable hardscape.
You weed, unfortunately. Weed control. Yeah, weeds are there's two four-letter words in my gardening vocabulary, weed and vult. It is an issue, depending on how you feel about pre-emergence. You can do that. Some people get really fancy and, try to grow thyme or some small creepy thing, creeping kind of plant there in between, and let that fill up. So it varies, but weeds they're good. I mean, they'll get in the littlest crack. They're very determined plants, but that's. Now, if you have something that's more gravelly, like the path in the Lath House with that, the clingstone on it, you probably don't have any weed issues with that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
If you have an area that's nothing on there, or it's just growing weeds and everything else, you can clear that area out totally. Just cut it down to the bare minimum. And then cover it with cardboard boxes, overlapping by a foot, and then cover with chips, or wood chips or whatever. I have 0 weeds. And they'll cut it, I mean, it suppresses the weeds totally. But if you put them up, the cardboard up against each other, they'll come right through the middle. They'll come right through. But if you overlap them, they stops them. You will have no long, and the cardboard eventually decomposes, and all you're gonna have is fertile soil. All you do is move back the wood chips, plant your plant, you will have no more, and cover the wood chips up against the plant, and you have no more problems as far as weeds.
And you have a question, sir?
How does the first flush diverter work? How does it automatically do it?
How does it automatically do? I think it depends on the product you get. I don't have one. Mine's just a diverter, but it's a certain volume passes through it, and which means that sometimes when we get those short little bursts, you may not get anything getting diverted. If it's only a ½ inch or a ¼ inch, it's going to divert everything, and you're not going to get anything into your container. But they're usually based on volume, some sort of volume, or time, or a time measure, because again, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes, because the first ring is what's going to be the dirtiest. Yes, in the back.
I've got lots of different slopes in my yard. I'm remembering those pictures of rice paddies on hills, trying to get my shovel out and experimenting with cutting the slope into a series of terraces. Is that a good approach?
It can be. It can be, especially if on the flatter parts you are going to build that soil and plant.
Mm-hmm.
That will help. Yes. Are you going to grow rice?
No.
Carolina
All kinds
gold?
of
It's
different
making a
flavors.
comeback. Yes. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What do you do about mosquito control for like rain gardens and so forth?
Rain gardens should not be an issue because they are not they should not hold water more up to 3 days, more than 3 days. And it takes 3 days for the eggs to hatch. So if it is designed properly, it will not hold water. Now, if you have I have a client, she's in a bottomland soil, they're hydric soils. These are soils that hold water, so it's a different plant palette. I would never put a rain garden there because that soil is not, it's not going to absorb the water because it's already wet soil. So she's going to have a bog or a pond, and she's going to have an issue. You can use the BT, the dunks, or the pellets, and those are effective. And BT is supposed to be specific, it's only supposed to be specific for the mosquito larvae and not hurt anybody else. Yes, ma'am.
You talked about a rain garden someone dug 5 feet deep. How deep is normal?
How deep is normal? That is a function of how much water you want to deal with and how much space you have to work with. If you're going to treat a full half inch, are you trying to get the first half inch, or are you trying to get the first inch? And there's a trade-off between the overall dimensions of the garden and the depth. You can go very shallow and make it really big. Or if you have to, you make it smaller and you go really deep. But your top, if this is the normal soil level, you have a depression, and you should, about 50% of it should be whatever your amended filter bed is. You can use simple compost and gravel and what your native soil, but half of it, 50% should be that. Then you plant. Then you put a few inches of mulch, and especially that tree mulch that is only shredded once, that's the best stuff because it's big and heavy and it's not going to float away the way pine straw and pine bark and stuff do. So that's actually great stuff to mulch with. And you should still have what they call the ponding depth, which is the area below the regular soil. And that's where the water will stand for a short amount of time. But then it's either going to overflow or it's going to infiltrate. Now mine were dug, I got help because it was a research project, and mechanically dug and then shoveled. So they went pretty deep. They went a good 2-3 feet. And I have estimated that my holding capacity is 2 inches. I don't even start to pond seawater until after we have 2 inches. The only time my rain gardens have been full was during Tropical Storm Andrea. That was the only time I had water all the way up to the top. That was the summer before last, 13. All right, excuse me a minute. Anybody else have any questions?
At the beginning of the show, it showed you can get certification on properties. How do you go about doing that?
You have to contact the individual organizations. Audubon has one for birds and other wildlife. The Monarch Way Station, what is that, Monarch Watch, what?
Monarch Watch, Pollinator Partnerships, Xerces has one. Xerces Society has a pollinator certification.
Yeah, National Wildlife has the natural wildlife.
So there's several places you can go to?
Yes,
North
just
Carolina
go-
Native Plant Society.
There you go.
Really? I didn't know. I have no clue.
Yeah.
I'm just a gardener.
That's- Lot.
You gotta meet, well, you have to meet
You
certain
have to
requirements.
meet certain-
Audubon
Oh, yeah.
doesn't have it in North Carolina.
I think I
do
meet
they?
all of it.
I don't know if Audubon has it in North Carolina. You'd have to contact them. Some of them, it's an online form that you, or it's a form you fill out and probably have to submit pictures and things and then send it to them and then they say yay or nay. Others, they come and they actually look. It depends on who you're dealing with. Now, like Audubon, they have done a thing where they're actually doing whole neighborhoods and communities. There's several in Florida that have become Audubon certified communities. So, and any golfers in the room? My husband's a golfer. Any golfers in the room? St. Andrews in Scotland. I forget who they were certified by, but they're a certified conservation habitat.
The preserve on the other side of Lake Jordan is a certified Audubon golf course.
There you go. Thank you.